I want you to know this because this is all recent development. Who's buying this data? You may say, well, it's not the government, so we're fine. But in this case, a lot of it is the government. For example, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they purchase location data to monitor compliance with COVID restrictions. So here's a governmental actor purchasing some of your data. The IRS, there's a criminal investigations unit inside the IRS. They actually purchased some of this data. Data brokerage was estimated to be a $200 billion industry back in 2020. There's one called Axicom, ACXIOM. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but they're a data broker, and they had data from 500 million consumers worldwide. One broker obtained 3 million new records every month. This is according to the Federal Trade Commission. So understand this is a new big issue, and it's a way of getting around some of these warrant requirements. Now, next on footnote 69, we get into Hampton versus Hanrahan. Hampton versus Hanrahan is given to us because of the national security coverage that is on the syllabus. And this part of the lecture, I really just want to, instead of just talking, I want to show you a couple of things because this is, to me, an image that captures the detriment of any national security project. And I want to make sure that you actually get to see this as opposed to just hear it. I do believe I'm sharing the screen right now, but I'm not sure why my screen is locked and not moving. So let me try to figure that out because I want you to see all of the screen and not stop share. I think maybe I have too many shares. Could that be it? Hang on just a second. It's literally just locked. Mm-mm. Okay, now I think I am sharing the screen. I don't know what just happened, but all right, here we go. So with Hampton versus Hanrahan, this is a national security case. And I always take time with this one to actually show images. And the reason I do that is because a lot of times students will never believe that what I'm going to say is possible because it just defies imagination once you read the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment tells us about how the government can't do anything to you unless they have a warrant, and how you are safe in your persons and papers and property and homes against the government. And so I like when I get to some of these national security cases to actually show footage and facts because it is so difficult to conceive of when you read the Fourth Amendment. So here is Hampton versus Hanrahan, which you were asked to read. We know now that this dates back to 1969. We know that this happens in Chicago. We know that it involves the Black Panther Party chairman, Fred Hampton. And we know that the government declared Hampton a national security case. And so they decided to put him under surveillance. We know that he is living at this physical address in Chicago. And we know that Hampton is only 21 years old. So he is extremely young. And there is another Panther by the name of Mark Clark, who is 22. They're also very young. And both of them happen to be shot inside of this West Monroe Street unit in Chicago. Those Panthers were shot just once. They were shot from a shotgun that was held by Mark Clark, which we believe was actually fired after Clark was shot. So in other words, it was almost an involuntary discharge. So we have, just imagine, the FBI is involved, and they're working in conjunction with the Chicago police. And this is important because the FBI is federal, but a lot of times they form these state federal partnerships, and they worked alongside local police agencies. And that would have been the case in this instance with Fred Hampton. And what the FBI had decided was the Black Panther Party was a national security case. And as a result of them being a national security case, they're American citizens. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind the Constitution of the United States makes them certain promises. For example, the government won't come messing with you unless they have a warrant. So keep trying to reconcile all of these Fourth Amendment conversations now with this new discussion of national security. There's other folks in this apartment that is also shot. Some of them are also going to wind up in the hospital, some of them with lifelong injuries. All of them, obviously, if they're not killed and no longer with us, they will be lifelong trauma survivors, which we'll talk about at the end. One of those lifelong trauma survivors will be Deborah Johnson. She is Fred Hampton's fiance. She's 8 months pregnant at the time with Fred Hampton's son. She's sleeping in the bed with Fred Hampton when the police attack begins. And what's important about this now is that this attack wasn't an impulse attack. There was a man named O'Neill who befriended Hampton and became a member of the Black Panther Party. And so Hampton trusted O'Neill. He thought that this is my assistant. Ultimately, I see him first thing in the morning. I see him last thing in the evening. He's a part of everything I do. Little did they know that O'Neill was a government informant. And O'Neill had been reporting to the FBI how the inside of the unit looked, and what the habits of Fred Hampton was, along with the other folks who would be in this unit. But the most important thing is the government secured a map of the inside of the house from O'Neill, and they gave O'Neill instructions on this particular night to fix Fred Hampton's meal and his drink. In that drink was a sedative. So he gave him Kool-Aid, which was the normal drink, but there was a sedative in it. And the idea was that once Hampton and his fiancee Deborah got into bed to go to sleep, the officers would come in, and by him being so heavily sedated, he wouldn't be able to react. So this would be the way that they would essentially assassinate him. And that's important. The police are not injured at all in this attack. The police end up firing their guns at least 90 times. That is the smaller number. There is an argument that it was well over 100 times. So keep in mind now, these are officers who have a map of the home. These are officers who've been meeting with O'Neill for many, many months to plan this attack. These are officers who know there's an 8-month pregnant woman in the house. Officers who understand the layout of the house, who's going to be armed, and officers who come in firing. 90 to 99 times is very conservative figures. Now, as I say this, somehow you should be saying this is starting to sound a lot like what we heard about during the Black History Month talks with the Panthers down in New Orleans, because the way they were ambushed there was quite similar in the sense that it was planned, that it was a really aggressive response, that it was coming guns a blazing, and not really show relevant concern for anybody that may be impacted. So now, what I'm hoping you learn through this, I want everybody to just take a quick look at this, because this is rich with lessons. Many of them should be a review at this point as I'm speaking. You should be saying Fourth and 14th Amendments. I already can do that analysis in my head and see the violations that happen. We talked about immunity protection, so you should know that there's going to be immunity for all of these official actors, so nobody's going to be accountable. We've learned about indictments. So we know that if the occupants of the house are charged, they're going to be indicted. If the officers are charged, they're going to be indicted. They're going to be brought before grand juries. They're going to have grand jury trials, all of that. Everything you see on this screen, everybody should be saying this one case nearly runs us through the entire syllabus in the course. And so if you wonder why did I put this on here, it's not because I'm an advocate for the Black Panther Party like people probably think. It's more because there is a lesson here that takes us through almost every single corner of our syllabus. What is probable cause? Did they have it? What is the warrant requirement? Did they have it? Was this a no-knock warrant before we even begin to think about no-knock warrants in this country? And then, of course, what does national security do to all of these conversations that we have relative to the constitutional protections you see on the screen? So all of these lessons, as we talk about this case and as you read it, if I present any of this on the final exam, it should be easy for you to talk to me about every aspect of this Hampton case and these lessons that it imposes, because it forces lessons in every one of these regards. Who is Fred Hampton? Again, I said to you he was young, and I said to you he was a Black Panther Party member. But what I need to say to you now is that you see him doing what he did best. He was a Martin Luther King of the Black Panther Party. In other words, he was an eloquent orator. He was able to galvanize people with his words. Fred Hampton was a magnet. People heard him and they wanted to follow. And as a result of that, he became a threat. Now, if you take con law, you should be looking at this picture and there should be a simultaneous con law analysis happening. As I am doing the criminal procedure analysis, you should be doing the con law analysis. And you should be saying that in addition to all of this stuff that she's saying about criminal procedure with this Fred Hampton case, there is also the First Amendment right to speech. And did he have a protected right of speech? Because if he did, his First Amendment rights were as violated as his Fourth Amendment rights, as violated as his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. All of that you should be thinking and prepared for on an exam. Now, this is the actual crime scene photo. So the bed that is full of blood is the bed that Fred and Deborah were in that particular night that they were assassinated. I am not using the word recklessly because now a jury has declared this to be exactly that. I'm sorry, not a jury, but a finding at least has declared this to be that. I want to next go to the next scene, which is the bullet holes that were in the wall. I want you to look at the size of these bullets. Just to understand now, this was the bullet that was chosen of all the possible bullets that could have been selected to actually fire into a home that was occupied by human beings, by United States citizens, by young folks, 20, 21-year-old folks, by an 8-month-old pregnant woman. These were the bullets of all the possible bullets chosen. These were the ones that we wanted to use. And that's important that you see the size of these bullets and ask yourself, could someone survive being hit with not just one of these, but over 100 of them? And if not, that would help you begin to process whether this was just policing or whether this was assassinating. And that's why I show you this. So we know that the ballistics experts say that of all of those bullets, only one of those came from the Panthers' direction. All the rest of them would have come from the direction of law enforcement. Again, this is very consistent with the facts as we know them from the local chapter here in Louisiana, and consistent with the pattern around the country when these Panthers would be under attack. And this is why when we talk about these Panthers and violence and Panthers and police, I always say that those conversations have to be approached with caution, because in no way do I ever encourage, support, excuse, defend any person harming any person not respecting authority. I'm an authority figure in this role that I play, and I certainly want people to respect my authority. So I would advocate no less for police. But it's important that when we have these conversations, factually, we understand, because the Panthers have been the one historically that the world believes has been the aggressor in these attacks. And so these now are facts that have been found. This is not facts according to Angela Bell. These are facts that are found, and because you just read the case, that the gunfire was not coming from the direction of the Panthers. And that, by the way, is why the jury in New Orleans exonerated them. Same set of facts. And this is almost all over the country when you see these shoot-ins and shootouts. Some people call them shoot-ins. I call them ambushes, because I don't like to even make the suggestion that it was mutual. But you can see the layout of this apartment, and what you see, what looks like yarn or pins going through, is really the ballistic folks showing you the trajectory of the bullets, so that you could see which bullets would have come from where the body was in the chair, and where all the other bullets came from, which is at the entry point made by law enforcement. I wanted you to see these facts for yourself. This picture is, when we were in the Brave Cave a few weeks ago, we were talking about how one side of the room looked like we were all trauma victims, and the other side of the room looked like the lynching photo where there was a celebration almost. That is what this picture does for me when I see it. There is Fred Hampton's dead body being carried out of this unit. And if you look at the face of these officers, this is a very important picture to understand, because we're talking about this for purposes of national security. But national security comes up after we were just told for several weeks that we have this thing called the Fourth Amendment, and that government is there to keep a distance, stay away, not interface with you unless there's a warrant and good reason. And in this instance, we see there is no warrant. And I'm hoping to lead you to a question of asking whether there was good reason. Again, the point of this lesson is to understand how national security comes into this discussion of Fourth Amendment protections and constitutional protections. But I think it's important just to take a glimpse of the faces and not to forget that these officers are holding in their hands a body of someone who was just literally taken out of an apartment. So, I mean, this is minutes after this particular crime scene develops. And then we see at the funeral, Fred Hampton there in his casket. I wanted you just to get a sense, because there is this narrative about the Panthers and how they were predators and hated, and the government wanted to kill them all. But I wanted you just to get a sense of what the funeral looks like. I mean, you see media there, and we know the media doesn't just show up for everybody's funeral. But I want you also to see the volume of support, because this was a funeral that was like a elected official in terms of community response and attendance. In case you don't know, Fred Hampton's funeral was attended by at least 5,000 people. He was eulogized by Jesse Jackson, Ralph Abernathy, men who are known for nonviolent agitation, Christian ministers, just to make sure we understand who Fred Hampton was. Also, you should understand that in the eulogy, Jesse Jackson said that when Fred was shot in Chicago, Black people in particular bled everywhere. no matter where they were. They didn't have to be in Chicago. And what I also wanted you to see is the headstone of Fred Hampton's grave. And I wanted you to see the way the grave is riddled with bullets, much like that apartment. Fred Hampton's son has explained that every time he comes to check on the grave, he has to order a new headstone because it is still being defaced in 2024. Now, the national security points that I want you to leave here with and understand for your final exam is that J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director for roughly 50 years. And J. Edgar Hoover singularly, please hear what I just said, not a committee, not a commission, not a study, not a vote of Congress. One man said that this group is the greatest threat to national security. That is a direct quote. The criteria for him making that decision was completely subjective. In other words, there's no test that he employed. It was just him in his mind saying that. And as a result, once you declare people national security cases, what you are ultimately saying is that they are an enemy of the state. They're an enemy of the United States government. And anybody, when you know you have an enemy, you act and treat them accordingly. And so, because of that national security designation, we could circumvent the United States Constitution and not grant them what the Fourth Amendment would have done for a normal person. So what I want you to see here for this conversation and for your exam, but more importantly, is the reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is not something that died with J. Edgar Hoover. I just maybe 3 weeks ago shared with my constitutional law students a really, really important article that was written about a movement around this country to have animal activists in the year 2024 put on terror watch lists. And once they're put on the terror watch list, they become national security cases, which means that all of the protections of the Constitution, they will not get. In fact, they won't get most of them. And it could leave them in the grips now of another bad actor, and their fate could be just as detrimentally affected as this individual. So what I want you to leave here understanding is that when you get to a final exam and you see the word national security, you ought to understand that at this point in our country, we have not grown and learned anything from this era of J. Edgar Hoover. We still allow a lot of subjectivity to go into what we call national security cases. And once that happens, governmental actors have very, very broad discretion to decide how they're going to put a stop to the national security threat that they may think that you represent. So the constitutional protections, I don't want to say none apply because some small things do apply. Like, for example, if you're in Guantanamo Bay right now, your national security case, and you do have a level of process that is due to you, but it is not the due process clause, and it is not the Eighth Amendment that we know, and it is not the Fourth Amendment that we know. So there is a hint of some lawful protections, but it is nothing close to the Constitution. And so on an exam, if I should tell you that a stop happened, a search happened, a frisk happened, a pat down happened, all of that happened, but by the way, this is a national security case, you should be able to understand that you won't be citing the rules for me about the Fourth Amendment and how that officer should have done certain things, because that is all suspended. And that's the point here. And the second point is just for you to recognize that this national security stuff is not an expired conversation. It happens to groups currently today. Black Lives Matter would have been another one to consider. You know, like I said, the article on the animal activists is alarming. It's frightening, the level of subjectivity that attaches to these designations. But I do expect you to know that for exams. Footnote 70 to 73, you should expect it to be covered on your exam. It's so well done in the assigned reading that I won't be talking about any of that specifically. I do want to mention though, black sites, you need to be able to define that for your final and you need to be able to recognize it. So what is a black site? The main trait that will help you recognize a black site is that it usually is a secret location. A black site is usually a prison or it's a detention center, either or. And what goes on there, either you're using this to interrogate folks or you're using it to detain folks. That's usually the reason. The world always thought that the CIA used these black sites outside of the US, but it's important that you understand that black sites are now a conversation and a law enforcement practice inside the US.